How long is it going to take before someone steps in and takes initiative to solve this ever growing issue of water pollution? Pollution itself is one of the biggest killers on Earth. It affects over 100 million people across the world. Approximately 40% of lakes, rivers, and streams are too polluted for human or aquatic life. These statistics are no strangers to the world. In 1975, the National Academy of Sciences estimated that 14 billion pounds of waste have been dumped into the ocean from boats and other sea vessels. How much worse does this have to get for the whole world to get involved in the effort to save the population?
So, what is water pollution? Water pollution is defined as the presence in water of toxic chemicals and biological agents that exceeds what is naturally found in the water and may pose a threat to human health and or the environment. Water pollution may consist of chemicals introduced into water bodies as a result of various human activities or naturally occurring pollutants from the environment. Any kind of water can become polluted, regardless of its size or location, through a number of ways like sewage, fertilizers or chemicals, wastewater, oil, plastics or trash, or even alien species.
A common misunderstanding of today's society is that there are three different types of water pollution. The three subcategories of the different types of water pollution are chemical, radiological, and biological. Chemical water pollution is the most common of all forms of water pollution. It engulfs the contaminators such as oil, pesticides and fertilizers, and chlorinated products. Radiological water pollution is pretty straightforward, as in, it's anything radioactive that mixes with the water. The last form of water pollution is biological. Biological water pollution includes all of the microorganisms that appear when the type of pollution is evident. When different animals decompose and when animal and human waste isn't disposed of correctly, biological water pollution occurs. Water pollution can be divided into two main sources, either a point source or a non-point source. Point source pollution occurs when the epicenter of the pollutant comes out of one specified location. These are localized sources like an industrial process or mining activity. These sources are often regulated so that the effect may be predicted and the impact minimized. Unfortunately, accidental leaks and spills are constantly an exception to that. Non-point sources of water pollution do not necessarily have one specific site where the pollution is spewing out of. Rather, there is a combination of many unidentified outages from which pollutants are carried away by water discharges and runoff.
So, how can we test to see the extent to which water has been polluted? Chemical indicators and tests can be ran to measure the water's levels of things like dissolved oxygen, total solids, pH level, temperature or flow rates, nitrates, and phosphorus. Another simple way to assess a water body's pollution level is to evaluate the inhabiting marine life. If the normal aquatic life is living healthfully, then the water can be considered safe. However, if the marine life is not healthy, then the water body can be tagged with a general classification of pollution. An example of this observation is when the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration noted the lower portion of the infamous Cuyahoga River of Ohio as having no visible life, not even low forms such as leeches and sludge worms that usually thrive on wastes.
When people do consume this polluted water, they are very likely to inherit some sort of disease. The different types of possible diseases that may be infested within the polluted water come from different chemicals and living organisms. If too much of a specific chemical gets integrated within the water, it may raise serious health concerns. There are two different types of living organisms that cause health problems when consuming this diluted water: pathogens and algae. Pathogens contain various species of viruses such as bacteria, fungi, and intestinal worms. Algae, on the other hand, is not always toxic. It only becomes lethal when it is overgrown due to the appearance of nitrates and phosphates in runoff water. The algae will affect the food chain of not only humans, but animals as well. A major problem and cause of pollution, concerning the amount of people on the earth, is sewage. According to a 2013 study from the World Health Organization, around 780 million people don't have access to clean drinking water. On top of this, 2.5 billion people don't have access to proper sanitation and toilet facilities. Sewage disposal affects people's immediate environments and leads to water-related illnesses, such as diarrhea, killing almost 760,000 children under the age of 5 each year. However, in developed countries, we have toilets that flush out sewage, usually to treatment plants, but even after it is treated, the waste still has to go somewhere, and is sometimes pumped untreated straight into the sea. Until the 1990s, around 5 million tons of sewage waste was dumped by barge just from New York City each year.
Going off of the previous passage, about 50% of the world's ocean pollution is from sewage and wastewater. This transitions to the second most important issue of water pollution, wastewater. Each year, the entire world creates about 5 to 10 billion tons of waste that ends up being directly pumped into unregulated ponds, rivers, lakes, and oceans. Many people think that the majority of the dumping can be blamed on different factories and warehouses. But believe it or not, every household pollutes a little bit themselves. Some different ways that humans pollute our waterways is when, while we are driving, the spilled fuels, brake fluids, and bits of worn tires get washed away when it rains into the drains. These drains lead into the same unregulated bodies of water. Plastics are a lesser form of water pollution that has a more lasting effect. One reason for this is that plastic is one of the most common materials used in virtually every type of manufactured product. Another reason is that most plastics are not biodegradable, so they remain in the environment for a long time. It is estimated that a water bottle takes 450 years to completely decompose in the ocean, and fishing line takes over 600. But in reality, no one really knows how long it will take for most of the world's plastic to biodegrade. Even if most of this trash did decompose, it would just produce an ocean filled with smaller fragments of plastic. Even currently, most of the plastic found in the ocean are tiny pieces less than 1 centimeter in size, with the mass of 1/10 of a paperclip. And while plastics are not harmful like poisonous pollution is, they still pose a serious threat to seabirds and marine life. The term ghost fishing has been tagged to the strangling or choking of fish due to plastic fishing lines and other debris in the water. In one study of over 450 shearwaters near the North Pacific, over 80% of the birds were found to contain plastic residues in their stomachs.
We spoke with Denny Mahoney, retired Vice President of Aqua America, on his thoughts for what we can do as individuals and as a society to better the environment.
For instance, if you're getting rid of old gasoline that you used for a lawnmower, what do you do with it? You take it down to the inlet by the street, after the sun goes down, and dump it in there. Remember the Clark Griswold movie, Christmas Vacation, where he was dumping his, waste system, from the RV into the outlet? Well, guess where all that stuff from the outlet goes? Rain comes down, takes all that stuff from the inlet, dumps it in the streams go into reservoirs, and reservoirs are what is needed. Also,
the best way to combat the international dilemma is to retain the Clean Water Act and its regulations, but heavily enforce it to ensure the safety of our population and the future of the Earth. In terms of enforcement, former EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson has stated publicly that, quote, "The time is long overdue for the EPA to re-examine its approach to the Clean Water Act enforcement," end quote. In addition, the United States Office of Management and Budget asserts that the Clean Water Act enforcement efforts are inflexible and poorly managed. The Clean Water Act currently stands as a basic guideline to protect just the United States output of pollution. In order to effectively restore the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the world's water, we believe the United Nations needs to strengthen its influence and enforce the upgraded Clean Water Statute on other countries. Currently, in the United States, companies must receive permits that allow them to release a specified amount of pollution. If the Clean Water Act incorporates hefty fines for the companies and industrial plants that exceed these limits around the world, the companies will continue to do everything in their power to stay as far away from their set requirement as possible. Although these guidelines set in place may satisfy us for now, heavier regulations will be necessary to effectively restore the world's water supply. Mr. Denny Mahoney briefly addressed the possible sacrifices that must be made in order to better our environment.
As individuals, farmers have to be aware of this. They have to know what's underground. Geologists have to come out and determine where these aquifers are, and are they going to be taking water out of the ground in the vicinity of where farmers are laying all of this stuff. I mean, every good action results in an opposite and negative reaction. Good action is the fertilizers and the pesticides that give us the food that we eat, but the reaction is what's it doing to our groundwater when it seeps into the ground.
Unfortunately, these strict standards would come with significant sacrifices. Less output of pollutant would deem a lower production capacity of the goods we enjoy in our lives. Therefore, a drastic change in the volume of pollution will produce a drastic change in our way of life.
Water, okay, water, water, drip, water, okay, water, drip, water, okay, water, drip, water, okay, water.